Good evening. Welcome to the Northampton School Board meeting for Thursday, July 24th. We're going to begin tonight by having a public hearing. We will call the public hearing to order. This public hearing was posted on January 4th, 2019 in the Hampton Union. The purpose of the public hearing is to have a public hearing on the withdrawal from the Building Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund for Northampton School. The purpose of the withdrawal is to pay for replacement of the school's intercom system, which failed last spring and was repaired. However, it was found that the system is still not functioning properly and is so out of date that further repairs are not feasible. So it looks like a total replacement will be necessary, and so we're having a public hearing to make a withdrawal from the trust fund to pay for this because it was an unbudgeted item for this school year. So we'll invite anyone from the public or from the board to comment on that. No?
I think it's important because it's a safety issue.
Thank you very much. We will actually vote on this during our meeting, and at this time we will call the public hearing to a close. Thank you. And we will call our regular meeting to order at 7:05. Beginning as usual with our minutes from December 20th.
I move that we approve the minutes for Thursday, December 20th.
Second.
Any changes or corrections, comments?
Page 3, number 7B, it currently reads, Matt Ferreira reviewed the Northampton School Facilities Organization restructure plan. I think we should put in pilot plan. Yeah. And then at the end of that paragraph, I think we should put in to be reviewed July 2019. Is that right?
I would actually say April
Okay.
2019. That
Perfect.
way it provides us.
Perfect, whatever. I just wanted to make sure we had some date
And
certain.
we've already had our first review, but that'll be really the decision-making
Yeah.
time period.
Okay.
Right, my only comment.
So to be reviewed April 2019. Any other corrections, comments, questions? No? Okay, all those in favor of the minutes? Thank you very much. Moving on, correspondence commendations. Oh, before we get to that, I just wanted to just mention for those watching, our Assistant Principal Tracy Griffinhagen and our Superintendent Bill Lupini could not be here tonight because of other commitments.
Thank you.
So, Eric, correspondence commendations, starting with you.
Thank you, Mr. Sununu. I appreciate being able to lead off. My first commendation, I would like to commend staff member Cindy Smith. We had a winter holiday theme party, and Cindy Smith led the way from the get-go, organizing the team that helped set it up. We had in excess, from what I could tell, but we had 54 plus staff members in attendance on Friday, January 11th. So thank you to Cindy. It was at the Centennial Hall, by the way. Okay, so thank you to Centennial Hall. Also, I want to commend Curriculum Coordinator Becca Carlson for a few reasons. In the immediate sense, she's had a few opportunities to work with students, the spelling bee last night, the geography bee coming up next week, and tomorrow night, a school dance. So Becca's been integral in organizing the spelling bee and the geography bee, and through her advisorship with our student government, co-advisorship with Denise Pasden has helped the students organize the dance tomorrow night. So Becca Carlson, Denise Pasden, also with student government, Lori Berry for helping Becca with the geography bee next week, Linda Donahoe for helping Becca with the spelling bee last night, and Denise, as I've mentioned. So, Tony Petrowski, congratulations, Tony, for being our spelling bee champion last night. He'll represent Northampton School in the regional competition coming up. Our runner-up was Kayla Hyatt. So it was an intense competition. We had 13 initial participants, and it ran about 45 to 50 minutes of legitimate competition time. So the students got many words correct. Also, Brenda Eves and Linda Donahoe again for the Good Deeds Club. I highlighted in the administrative report, but the Good Deeds Club ran a fundraiser that was very successful. How, at least for that I put my eyes on, trash bags full of gently used winter jackets for Crossroads House and St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry. So thank you to those staff members who make that happen with our 3rd and 4th graders. And last but not least, I'd love to be able to commend each and every one of the students, but I do want to commend a 7th grade student for the beginnings of our school-wide recycling effort. So I've been working with Cam Stanton for a while now, sometime since before the winter break, and really her initial idea proposal dates back to the fall. But our recycling initiative is up and running.
That's great.
Led by Cam, along with a cohort, a cadre of 7th grade recycling captains who sign up. They volunteer their time. And again, Cameron organizes all of this. And I'll just say that we're off to a great start. We have recycling bins. We have 1st graders taking the milk from the cartons that they didn't finish, and they're dumping it into the orange bucket so that they can recycle their milk cartons, again, water bottles. It's a great initiative, and Cameron and her fellow 7th grade students are making it happen. So thank you to them. And just a little heads up, we may intend to, but I do want to say may, intend to incorporate a composting effort. We will pilot a composting effort for the spring, focusing on 6th through 8th grade. So it will be our 6th through 8th graders participating in composting. Maybe if it's very successful, we'll go to 5th and maybe 4th. But so 6th through 8th grade, middle school initially, and we'll see how successful we are with that this spring. We hope to be able to partner with a town, a farm, or a family, that engages in that already.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Those are mine.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I've got one quick one. Yeah, I want to thank Matt and commend Matt. We had some questions from the community about the budget, and Matt, I think you did an outstanding job of giving in-depth answers on top of all of the other work that you do. So thank you for your thoughtful response and for preparing the potential frequently asked questions document. Good stuff.
Thank you. What else? No? All right, moving on. Thank you. Questions or comments from those in attendance? Anything, Catherine? No. All right, thanks. Education update, school council.
Absolutely. Back at me. So the school council met last Wednesday, the 16th. On our agenda, we discussed the school technology plan. So the school board has adopted the 2018 through 21 technology plan, and our discussion centered around the approved plan and how the plan will impact instruction and how teachers will be prepared in making the plan come to fruition. A rich and engaging discussion. We talked about middle school structure and scheduling. We had initially met on Monday. We followed up by talking about potential middle school structure and scheduling on Wednesday at council. And since the essential question coming out of our middle school work as of Wednesday was, how are we going to make next year work and make the most sense for students? So the administrative team and I worked very closely in follow-up with Dr. Lupini and the administration, both Northampton School and the SAU, has made the decision to have the 6th grade team support the 7-8 team of teachers rather than teach either a section or a class of either 7th or 8th grade. So the short of it is, the sixth grade will be organized into 2 homerooms. They will collaboratively teach social studies. They will have a 4th period, if you will, by which they lend direct instructional support for students in either 7th or 8th grade. Okay, so that was the resolution there.
I'm not sure I understand. And I apologize for not understanding.
No, it was verbal, so I don't have a graphic to show you. Tom,
So, what was it and what is it? And it's okay that it is. I'm just trying to get my head around it.
So, so the 6th grade team is, exists as an entity with 3 homerooms this year.
Yep.
So, for example, Trish Johnston teaches 3 sections classes of 6th grade English Language Arts. And a 4th period is social studies
Okay.
for her. Chris LaCroix, math, Brenda Tharp, science.
Yep.
And they each share, they have their own homeroom for social studies.
Gotcha. So right now, 6th grade is a team of its own.
Correct.
They each teach 3 classes of what their specialty is and 1 of social studies, so 4 instructional classes.
That's right.
Each day.
That's right.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
Okay?
And then what happens in 7th and 8th grade right now?
7th and 8th grade, right now, we have a 4-person team plus
Yeah.
special educator. So Lauren DeConstant teaches 2 7th grade classes and 2 8th grade classes.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
And-
So still
and,
4 classes, yeah?
That's right. So the only change will be, so we have our 7th and 8th grade team. Again, next year, Lauren DeConstant will teach 2 7th grade classes, 2 8th grade classes. Since the number of 6th grade students will be 33 at this point, we'll have 2 homerooms, 2 traveling groups. So Chris LaCroix will teach 2 classes of math, 1 section of social studies, and he will support 7th and 8th grade math.
Got it, because the
Okay.
class size in 6th grade is going down from
Yes.
3 to 2 classes. I got it. There's more bandwidth for that.
Absolutely.
Got it, okay.
Got it.
And the teachers will be collaborating to determine what that support will look like. We're just starting to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I needed to
No, not at all.
get it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So when you got together and the comment of how will we make next year work better for the scheduling and the students, that wasn't well, actually, you didn't use the word better. So that that didn't imply that there's things wrong this year. It was more about the class sizes shifting. How are we going to,
Right,
or was it what's not working this year and what can we do better next
It
year?
was more about the size of the cohort.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. So the 7th, 8th grade cohort will be 83 students next year, which is an increase of presently, I think, 13 students. So we were looking for ways for the 7th and 8th grade students to be minimally impacted, in terms of personalization, individualization, being able to provide each and every student qualitative, personalized feedback. So, and we feel that the administrative team feels that this structure will fit the bill.
So, 2 questions just to clarify. So 6th grade, because I know it was a question in the past by parents. So the 6th grade, they're going to have the same experience because they're still going to have the same teachers, right?
Yes.
It's just that in 7th grade, they're going to also have instruction from 6th grade teachers. Did this number of 7th and 8th grade, or 7th grade in particular, classes go up, or the class size is just a little bigger? So are there?
Well, so we have a very small 8th grade this year.
Yeah.
And a cohort of 42
Yeah,
7th graders, and a cohort of 44, plus or minus.
yeah.
Those numbers don't quite add up, but it adds up to 83. So larger 6th and 7th grade cohorts this year.
Yep.
Very small 8th grade. The 6th and 7th move up to 7th and 8th grade.
Yep.
And create.
But there's still
Might as well
2
classes.
8th grade homerooms, 2 7th grade homerooms,
Yeah,
and
that-
4
that-
teachers.
that-
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking.
That is not,
Sixth
that is
grade.
not
So-
impacted.
The
Sixth
sixth
grade
grade
is
team
gonna
will
be
play up
divided into-
next year, whereas they
Yeah.
don't have to.
We
this year.
discussed, other options we discussed were blending 7th grade, which we decided against. Okay, the administrative team in working with the teachers. So, and an option of splitting seventh grade science, splitting, splitting seventh grade social studies.
Gotcha. So the decision is your decision, so I'm not questioning the decision. I'm just trying to make sure I get my head around it and I can explain it to parents.
The integrity of the sixth grade team and the sixth grade experience was very important.
And seventh and eighth, because we have 4 7th and 8th from what homerooms now. We're going to have 4 7th and 8th homerooms next year.
Yes.
More kids.
I understand there's more kids, but still instructionally, are you adding additional math classes from next year to this year? There's just more kids in each class.
No. So
Right? So-
Ms. HB will have 2 classes of seventh grade, 2 classes of eighth grade.
Yes.
Correct.
All right. So it's not that there's too many classes to teach. It's the right number of classes, just how can we best deliver services to the kids that need it. So it could be that it would be tutoring or something that's
Absolutely.
being delivered. It's not necessarily that a current 7th grade teacher is going to teach less classes and a 6th grade teacher is going to teach more. It's going to be delivering the right services to the right students at the right time.
Yeah, and we're thinking with the sixth grade team will help to provide the level of support, that will be necessary, whether it's tutoring or, scaffolding an already delivered lesson, that sort of thing.
So what happens next in 2 years when the 7th graders become 8th graders? Are the 6th grade teachers working with 8th graders at that point? And how does that?
At this point, the sixth grade team would still be intact. So because
We'd have
that
more students that year.
that cohort is presently 45, we will have kept the sixth grade team intact next year. When that 2 years out, that group of 45 again comes back up, then we have the 3-person sixth
The
grade team.
7th, 8th cohort is now smaller because the 33 has moved into the 7th, 8th.
It will have
So
reduced
it's more
back down by
like,
10.
it's more like this year, where we have 70 or so.
So is the philosophy then, because it sounds like the practice right now is 6th grade intact, 7th and 8th sort of team. Is that the philosophy kind of going forward, or is it we have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teaching staff and we'll adjust it depending on the size of the classes? Or you're trying to settle into like a cadence of 6th grade stays intact? Because that's what it sounds like to me. But I think it's important for
yes.
people to know because of they start talking about this tracking thing. And you told me it was going to be 7th and 8th grade, and now 6th and 7th are combined. Like just to
Yeah.
get some
Because
clarity
there was a
around.
concern, and we had the conversation around the budget where we
Right.
said it's important to look forward 3 years and say, let's come up with a structure we think will work across multiple years, and that's the 7, 8 team and the 6 team.
Correct.
And it sounds like we're trying to stick with that, which I
For the
think is
next 2
important,
years,
so
for the next
people-
2 years.
Yeah,
And to Greg's question, we have begun to discuss how using 7 regular educators plus 2 special educators plus associated support staff across 3 grades may even more effectively serve students.
But that visioning piece is down the road. We're just starting to have conversations as a team, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers, to think, what could the middle school experience at Northampton look like? What would we dream of for our students? And we're just starting to have those conversations. We're thinking about what schools might we visit, what research might we investigate. But that is a visioning process that will take time, and that will obviously be, speaking to all stakeholders to see what we might reimagine for a long-term vision at middle school experiences at Northampton School.
Right, and very, very much aligned with and associated with a true competency-based learning.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is important to talk about in public and with people so that they're not in a model that gets us into a situation where we're binging and purging on
Right.
employees. 'Cause I guess that's where I'm ultimately going. If we can find a model that we can be flexible with and that people know that, so it's not going to look the same every year. It might look the same for 2 or 3 years, but then we're going to shift.
Next two years, 6 through 8 is steady at 118 and then 117, 118 and 117. After that, we settle back down around plus or minus 105. So we would be looking at 6 through 8, 105 plus or minus students, 7 regular educators, 2 special educators, and so on.
So the visioning, as you go through it, it's part of its visioning, part of its prioritization. We've got a one-to-one tech initiative.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out what the vision's gonna be for next year, and implementing all of it so that people can execute thoroughly, and they have the resource that they need to succeed. You've got a pretty short timeframe. So I think also, what the first priority is, whether it's flexing next year or whether it's making sure that we're gonna get that one-to-one initiative out, needs to be defined as well through the council or however you do it.
We're right. Well, flexing in terms of the middle school staffing,
Yep.
That's not part of what we're looking
Well,
at for next year.
so it can't be binary that either we figure out how we work the 6th grade team into 7th and 8th grade, what that vision should be, that Becca was talking about, or we figure out how to roll out the one-to-one computer initiative. It can't be, it needs to be both and. It can't be either or.
Right.
And doing both may not be easy.
Well, and the third leg of that stool is what Eric said, is the competency-based education, because we may not even be talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We may be talking about students in middle school.
Yep.
And how they're tracking
Yep.
along.
I mean,
Fair enough.
Right.
Right, I guess that's my point about philosophy versus here's
A
model.
vision is to be the model K through 8, pre-K through 8 for move on when ready, true competency-based education in New Hampshire.
Amen.
And that's big.
That's good.
And we certainly have a level of expertise with our staff to pull it off. But we're gonna need some time to make it happen.
Good.
Okay, so, Unified Arts Integration, we discussed that. We will be talking about the placement process for kindergarten through 5th grade at our February staff meeting, among other things. We have a scheduling meeting led by administration, the Unified Arts teachers, primarily Dan Singer and Pat Yetton, and grade level teachers are invited to work as a group to launch our scheduling process for next year. We talked about our school assemblies, our community meetings. As I mentioned, 1st grade, at least I believe I mentioned, maybe not. 1st grade is having theirs tomorrow morning. We talked about very briefly, our 4th through 8th grade intervention team. That is multi-tiered systems of supports, or RTI, response to intervention. So we have a K through 3 team in place that was working through last year, and we have a working model for primary and 3rd grade, and we're translating that to 4th through 8th grade. That group is facilitated by Ms. Griffin-Hagan Tracy, Ms. Vass, and Ms. Carlson. And so how students who need make a little catch-up growth or need a little boost in a subject area here or there, usually cycling in for 4 to 8 weeks, how we do that effectively with and for our 4th through 8th graders. That's what we're building. And we also discussed the budget, this year's budget and next year's proposed budget as it relates to staffing and scheduling decisions, and that was a rich, vibrant conversation. There weren't any task items or action plans or anything else coming out of that, but it was a very involved discussion.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions, further questions for?
Yeah, are there any
Sorry.
updates at this time on the progress on Web to School?
No, Power School.
Power School, that's what I meant, I apologize. Hey, I apologize. Power School.
Yes.
There's no
the
progress
update
on
is
Web
that school is gone.
Burn on and what?
It's still gone.
Yeah.
The update, the rollout
Power School.
of the Power School portal will happen as planned and scheduled. So the second term ends on March 8th, Report cards will come out following, and the parent portal will open in concert with second term report cards.
Third term.
Third term.
Oh, I'm sorry, third term, yes, sorry, the third term grading period, yes,
Yes,
sorry.
the third term, the opening of third term. So March 8th, second term ends, third term begins the following Monday, the 11th. So the portal will be open for middle schoolers come March 11th.
And it will be similar for any parent that looked in, if they had a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, they would see similar stuff.
Yes.
Right, so the expectation, so it's not like I
information.
look in and it's full for me and it's not for somebody else, right?
Right, exactly,
Okay,
yeah,
good,
yeah.
good.
So the middle school team has all been gaining their, their comfort level with how Power School works and making sure that the data that they enter is reporting out in the way that they expect it to, that they're learning the tool, the power of the tool.
That's great.
And so that's what our focus has been this, for their work on their grade book this trimester.
Thank you, thank you.
They'll be comfortable next.
So just refresh my memory, what will that look like when a parent goes on to the portal?
It's very similar to what everyone kind of parent would see. So it's basically you log in as a parent and it's, and it says there what the current average is. You can click on that. It'll open up and see what the assignments are, how the student did. It opens up the opportunity for comments specific to the assignment or specific to the student in that assignment that the parent could read. It's a nice communication tool, just as it is.
So quizzes, tests, homework assignments, just like, okay, awesome.
All right.
311.
Any other questions for Eric?
Caught that now.
School council?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
All right. Our next item dovetails with some of the stuff we were talking about, which is Becca's going to give us a presentation on competency-based education.
Becca and Rana.
And Ronna,
And,
excuse
yeah.
me.
Dr., would you want Dr. Anderson to click through it for us?
Well, I just
So that you
I'm
can-
gonna
have to move, so.
step
Oh.
on.
Would you mind doing that for us, Dr.
gonna move
Anderson? Thank you.
And I will say Becca.
Oh, thank
How's
you.
that?
That's
So we
lovely.
can have one.
Perfect.
So, some really interesting pieces when we were collaborating through this process, and I want to first commend Becca on, I believe this is like round 3 of shot at the presentation. And the encouraging part was that we had so many similarities in our thinking, like identical slides. So that was really, really exciting for us in this process. So we didn't want to repeat what you've heard to ad nausea, but however, we think that that is also important. And plus for the public that is watching and would want some information. So competency-based education is actually an initiative through the New Hampshire state. So sometimes people worry that it's administrators or schools or boards that are having this happen, but it actually comes from the state, and it originally started in high schools, and high schools had to be fully implemented by 2008, 2009. And then as they continued to look at what were the minimum standards for school approval, they looked at it from a K-12, through a K-12 lens, and said, what do we want competency to be upon graduation? So that's a little bit of the history, and I try not to ever read the slides to you. So that's how it started. All right, next one. So what has happened through this evolution, New Hampshire was actually a leader in the United States in competency education. And through the color coding, you can see that we are considered one of the advanced states, then green, yellow, white, and the lines. So what's really interesting about that is, although New Hampshire is considered one of the leaders, when we go to different conferences and the design studios, True Revolution, it is what a lot of agencies try to push for professional development, to support our schools and to make money. When we go, what competency looks like, even presenting schools, it differs. So the way districts, schools, SAUs choose to implement it, it's not the same. So we have this concept of students are assessed on competencies. But that looks different from different districts, even though New Hampshire is considered the leader nationally. Okay?
Can you go back for a second?
Sure.
What is this other initiative, the ILN?
It's California being awesome at
But-
everything they do.
So they're still in the implementing of policies, so that's part of this, this group of states, the Council of Chief State School Officers. So they're identifying and implementing policies to support student-centered approaches to learning. They don't necessarily have the same vocabulary that we do around competencies, so it's a little bit of a different initiative.
Like a hybrid of different components of competency ed and whatever initiatives come federal and state levels.
So in looking at that chart, can you be both? Because it looks like
Yes.
there's some, so we are an ILN state, ILN, yeah, right?
Yep. That's what it says.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so when we look at that, when I came, actually today is my 2-year anniversary. Go ahead.
So the yellow state emerging, does that mean that they're starting to get on board with it, or they haven't yet
Their
made
progression. Like our high
that
schools.
decision yet?
Our high schools had to start back in 2008. They were supposed to be fully implemented. Having been at now my 3rd high school since that period of time, it looks different everywhere, and the progress, or what people are calling full implementation, is different. And we'll talk more about that in the presentation and in my board report
So
tonight.
specifically, New York State and Massachusetts, typically, Massachusetts, I think the last ranking I saw was #1 in public schools in the country. All the New England states were up there.
Yep,
but and
absolutely.
New York and Massachusetts are always very high, as well as like Connecticut. So what does yellow mean for that? Are they chugging along, business as usual, because their performance is very good as is, or
So-
are they starting to dabble with this notion of
exploring.
They're exploring,
competency,
they're
or are
exploring,
they?
So if you look at it like curriculum, and let's say that I'm doing, if we're truly scaffolding, and I'm talking about maybe doing multiplication. Ideally, that would be 3rd grade, that where you would introduce and emphasize multiplication. But some kids are ready ahead of time. So some 2nd graders might, that outstanding 2nd grader might get multiplication. Or someone an outstanding 3rd grader might be doing 2 and 3-digit multiplication. In competency, that's the same way. Where they are, they're just starting to introduce it. They're emerging in their adoption of competency ed. They're just starting to have it introduced versus getting to more mastery. So New Hampshire is considered a state of mastery, which is really interesting because we live and breathe it over a variety of districts between the two of us and Eric as well. And it's been different where you go. We'll talk more about that, what we're doing. I will talk more about that, what we're doing with the SAU teams,
Use
to
some Six
explain what
Sigma.
it's going to mean for SAU 21 in the districts.
And I think that the level of local control affects the ability to move the
Yes.
progress forward. You might notice that both Texas and New York and Massachusetts, those are all yellow. And the amount of state control that those districts have around educational policy is usually significantly more than New Hampshire has a lot more local control, which allows this type of change to happen more rapidly.
Okay.
And that's why we and boards get to make decisions and have input as what you want competency ed to look like in your schools and in your districts. So it's exciting for New Hampshire, but it can also get really messy and look different depending on where you go.
So if New Hampshire is a mastery state and we haven't adopted competency-based learning in Northampton School yet, are all the other schools in New Hampshire, have they adopted it? Are
No.
we behind?
no.
What percentage of schools have adopted?
Well, so let me give it another shot. So if you say, all they require us to do is be based on competence, assess kids on competencies. That's what high schools had to do. But what that looks like, there's some districts or SAUs that chose to have no numerical grades anymore, that it's all competency based. And if you take the tenet of move on when ready, some districts literally said you have to meet all competencies in a course or you don't get credit for that course. And I want to say it was like Bedford. When Bedford first opened, they had this huge percentage of kids that weren't going to graduate or go forward because it looks different what they choose. So our high school, we have both. We report a grade, an average. We have two transcripts and competencies. And I'll talk more about that in my board report, if you read it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask you a question on your example? I'm sorry. So what happened in Bedford, real quick?
oh, you made me think. I think they went through
Because
and they
that's
revamped
actually
things.
that's where I get stuck on this whole move on when ready, because it's a public school, and if you're not ready, you don't move. So do I go to high school, but I come back here for math, 7th grade math?
And that varies. So when we talk about local control, that varies more. And hopefully I can answer that better when I'd like talk about my board report and and we're going to answer it here, what it looks like, how you implement. Do you go, So Bedford went to grading and assessing. So many districts do that. I watched school after school that starts with grading. So when we look at all the tenets, which will be part of our presentation as well, depending on where you start, we chose to focus on quality performance assessments because that pushes all the other tenets at the same time.
When it kind of,
RS,
gotcha, okay.
me with the Professional Development Committee in Competency-Based Learning. So, for example, when I got here, and this is a good segue, and I want to answer all your questions. When I got here, nothing was done in K-8 competencies. No work had started. The high school is well underway in their work, but nothing had happened.
Here?
SAU 21.
Yeah, she's
2
saying
years
all
ago
middle
today,
schools, all middle schools.
2 years ago today, is
We
nothing
had a
had-
competency-based grading system.
Right.
Northampton, it was
standards-based.
standards-based. It wasn't, what our teachers were calling competencies were actually standards.
But we were using the word competency.
Yes.
Okay, that might have been some of the
Oh,
confusion.
that's your, I get what you're
So,
saying, yes.
I mean, our teachers talked about competency-based learning here 2 years
It
ago.
was standards.
It was,
Yeah, I
Yes.
think it was called standards. It
Okay.
wasn't called
And they-
competency.
Someone might have
Okay.
thrown it out once in a while, but
And they get it,
Or
that
the-
it was
Or the-
standards.
Once in a while.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay?
all right.
So, one of the very first things we did, I gathered information, talked to the different schools, went to the different buildings, got to know what was going on at the high school, what they had done for their implementation of competency. And so, when we had our first large-scale administrative retreat, from my understanding, they had in a while, not this past summer, my first summer, we chose and started with, let's get a district professional learning goal. One, because each school has, like, you have your board goals, and then each school has their goals. I'm like, well, let's get one that's in common, because my charge was we need some alignment. We need some curriculum alignment. And from this board in particular, you decided an articulated curriculum in your schools. So this was the path, the way I chose to approach it, in conjunction with the leadership, and when I say the groups I work with, all the constituents, the teachers and the administrators. So we sat and we wrote a measurable, a SMART professional learning goal with the hopes of having this completed by 2020. And so when Greg, you asked me, or Cindy, one of the five of you, asked a question about where are we compared to other districts, that's why it looks so different. We're shooting for 2020. I remember Tom saying, can we do this by then? Is this enough time? Well, we're hoping to. Is it going to be full and perfect and untouched? No. Our work will be living, breathing documents long after I'm gone. Those revisions will continue to happen because that's what's really important. So here's what we chose for our district professional learning goal. And teachers use this, excuse me, a lot in our presentations. When they go on to Frontline, they connect their planning to it, and it's a large portion of how we're using grant funding, a lot of our Title II money to try to get this done, as well as what I have asked for and budgeted in the SAU plan. And this is what our 5-year plan is based off of. So if you look at it, it talks about common assessments. Rubrics would be how we report out on how kids are doing. Our reporting tools to advance student learning in a growth model. So I can talk more about that, but you guys have seen or heard this. So it says fully aligned competency curriculum. So we tried to get the alignment. We adopted the state competencies, which are connected to standards, Common Core standards. That's where we're working off of in all of our work. So once you guys, I'm ready. Once you guys agreed to our consultant, we had the 2 presentations, and we chose to work with John Vanderels. He's presented, which comes from Competency Works, the tenets of competency education. Now, districts, as I had said, choose to approach this in different ways. So students advance upon mastery. Some districts chose that, for example, Bedford, and they had a wide array of students that didn't have passing scores that could potentially not graduate. They had to quickly look at what are their personalization plans, what are they doing for interventions, how are they going to help kids meet competencies or make up competencies or regain them. So that was one example of what happened. We chose, and even though when I started these discussions with vertical teams last year, so the first summer we sent all the administrators to the design studio just for K to 8s to understand what competencies are, get a common ground. We then had quite a large turnover of administrators, stepped back and took another different team, included everyone this past summer. But last year in our vertical teams, we went through letting the representatives from all the K to 8 schools understand more of what the tenets of competency ed, what is competency education, because they didn't know. So, in talking with John, we did a lot. We did surveys. We gathered our data from our different PD days and did a design rubric survey. So each principal did it in conjunction with staff to see where all the different schools were. Taking that data, our PD day data, survey data, we chose to start ours with the lovely green bullet. We chose assessment is meaningful and a positive learning experience for students, because that kind of pushes all the rest of our work. If we don't know what we're teaching, how are we then going to everyone to go to grading and reporting? Because why? Kids want to know how they're doing and parents want to know how their kids are doing. And as teachers, that's the biggest thing that we're held accountable for. And you guys have lived it, probably, you know, what we've all been through together the past 2 years on the grading and reporting for this district. So we said, well, if it's not articulated what you're teaching and how you're assessing if you're being effective in the teaching, how you report it out is irrelevant. What are you reporting out on?
Question.
Yep.
Can you provide some clarity around what advance means in this context? You know, there's different types of advancement. There's advancement just within the classroom on a week-to-week basis,
Okay.
between different skills they're learning. There's advancement between grades. There's advancements to other schools. What's the context of advance?
So that's huge philosophical, and as I said, it looks different in different SAUs and districts. That's where we are with an administrative team. We've had extremely rich conversations this year, facilitated with John and facilitated with me, that we're having a design team. And if you think about the 5-year plan, we talked about getting the subgroups, because we want to define that for SAU 21. What does that mean? What does advance upon mastery mean for us? Does it mean, in like you just said, in competency work, the way you're regrouping your middle school? Is it going to be middle school? Could the 6th grade support next year mean on competency? That might be a system where you help kids meet competencies that they hadn't. Well, the class is going on, but they just need a little more opportunity to consistently meet it. So those are the things that will be defined through that team, which is the administrative team, but with representations from all the schools, subcommittees, potentially. I don't want to misspeak because we are in the throes of
We're just
it.
figuring it out right now.
And so that's when you asked me, like, for a 5-year plan, I did my best to give a 5-year plan, but it is really granular as to what we want. These are the tenets, but what do we want it to look like for SAU 21? And then each of the individual schools, because Northampton is really ahead, and I'm no reason to say that. I think they're really ahead of some of the other schools because they have worked so closely with standards. So we're looking to align those practices.
Competency education really is a continuum, and we haven't yet defined as SAU 21 where on that continuum we will be. And probably the thing that's most varied is what does the students advanced upon mastery look like. But really all of it has levels of competency-based changes in your current structures that you could investigate or hybrid it with more of a traditional model.
So we decided to start with assessment. How are we assessing if our students get it or not? Because that's data that affects everything else that we do. It affects how we have to know what we're assessing, then how we're going to assess it, and what do those assessments look like. So that's what we chose to start with, because we wanted to be a positive thing for kids and not the secret. Like you never know what's going to be my world. What's the study guide? And my son was just saying, Mom, he gave us a study guide with all this stuff on it, and then most of it wasn't even on the final. I don't ever want that for kids again. That here's a competency, this is what you have to know, but it's not this rote piece. It's how do you then take the knowledge that you have and apply it to a variety of circumstances. And when we get towards the end, we're going to share with you real stuff here at Northampton, a real quality performance assessment, and then I'll give you it's a second grade. And then I'll give you an example of what a quality performance assessment could or might look like. So that's what we chose.
Yeah.
We chose quality performance assessments. So looking at assessments that are meaningful and positive for kids.
So what's the timeline on defining these things?
We haven't even defined that part yet.
That's what this team's going to do. We put
But
our
I think
professional
we've been
development
talking
goal.
about this for a while now.
This is year 2.
We've been,
It's such,
This is year
this is
2.
the biggest moving target I've ever seen in my life.
It is.
It's,
but we spent
And
a
it's
lot of
va-
money
it's
behind a
vague.
consultant, and we don't have like an objective timeline on when
If you look
we're
at our
going
goal,
to even define what we're trying to do.
if we put, but we do. We put our goal to be 2020, to have our work done by 2020.
And John Vanderel's the consultant work that he's doing with us. He's working specifically with teams of teachers on creating QPAs. That work is being done right now. Those QPAs are being given to students right now.
Huge.
That's all already in process. And so that work is moving forward. Where we are in the continuum, that piece, I think, is
Like the
still-
bigger picture, do we want to retain kids if they miss some mastery? Like I know subjects in school where I wouldn't have met all the competencies or standards, but I got to go forward. I'm like, all right, my average will still be this, even if I'm really not good at that part. I can still go forward and I'll be on honor roll.
It's hard for me to imagine that there isn't like a vision of where we're going before
I
you start
agree.
like some of these efforts on assessments when we don't know what it's going to look like in the
Right.
future.
Well,
It
what's-
seems like everything should be
Yeah,
building.
I
to
wish
this
Dr.
vision.
Lupini was here because Dr. Lupini was pressed very hard on some of these questions, I think before he was even working here at the Operations Committee meeting. And there's actually documentation that does map this out in terms of what's being delivered and when it is being delivered and the QPCs and the timeline. Because we said at the OC and then at the joint board that this isn't a blank checkbook, right? We're blank check. You may not have it here or be prepared to talk about it, but I think
I
we
can
should.
probably pull it up on, I could probably pull it up for you. The 5-year plan, we do have a 5-year plan, Cindy, with a vision of it.
I would propose that we, maybe next meeting, we ask, when Dr. Lupini's here, for kind of a tighter version of it, because he'll knock it through.
Okay.
He was pressed on this.
yeah. So I know, I've seen the vision for the plan, but what I haven't seen is a vision for what we want, like to step back, because the plan and competency is a tactical approach. What's our plan for students? What do we want to get, and where do we want our students to go and be? And then how we get there is we're going to apply competency, which is going to address
Right.
X, Y, and Z with the students. I know there's a plan here and there's sort of a menu to choose from, but I guess
It seems
what
more
ultimate
tactical.
goal is it supporting for us? I haven't seen or heard what we want this to do for our students. Because when I listen, I don't think this is the case, but when I listen to it, it sounds like it's great for the bottom because it keeps everybody. But the kids that are here, what does it do for them? Do they just wait for everyone to catch it and then they all move to the next step? Is it so? That's the part that I'm not.
I think the plan is that it's good for both sides, because the idea is maybe the support from the 6th grade that's coming up with Mr. LaCroix might not be supporting the kids that haven't met the competencies. It might be supporting the kids that are ready to move on to the next competency.
Agree, and
Yeah.
that's what I want to hear.
Yes,
I haven't
that's-
heard
we
it.
have-
It's
Can I
all
give-
about
can I
getting
give-
people
That goes back to my
up
question
to
about
speed.
advance. It's like on
Yeah.
a day-to-day basis, a student is, masters a skill in math that they're expect to work on for a couple of weeks, masters it soon. Is that student gonna then move on to the next skill
Yes.
ahead of while the rest of the class?
That's the goal
So
of
how do
competency.
we, I know this goes back to, I assume, the individualized learning. How do we make sure our teachers have the resources or the time to be
Yes.
able to be, okay, I've got these 3 kids who,
The
they're
structure.
advanced quickly, I've got 7 kids who are here,
Back to
I've got 6
time.
kids who are here and 2 kids who are here. We're
That's what
expecting
the-
them all to move on and keep working, and
That's what our
in theory,
design
that's
team is
great.
doing.
Yes.
Yes.
Practically, I'm
No, but
concerned
I think
about
that it does, and I
that
have.
being successful.
But think about it. Our high school's been doing this for the past 10 years. They continually keep changing things to better meet the needs of our kids.
They have
One of the-
scale.
Pardon?
They have scale.
Yes.
They've got lots of
And-
classes,
But they
lots of.
also
Yes.
have multiple
Scale here.
tracks, though. They have different tracks for different,
Yes.
Right.
they have CP, they have
Which is the
honors.
simplest form of
They,
that.
they already have some of
Yeah.
that differentiation. We're talking about trying to do that within the classroom, within that, and so that students aren't, for lack of a better term, sitting around waiting. I think that's a great goal. I think that's a terrific goal. But again, it gets back to that, how do we make sure that once they master it, they advance, and our staff has the time and resources to be able to keep the ball moving forward on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, where suddenly you have all these kids sort of spread out across this spectrum of where they're at on a particular skill and moving at different rates. And I think
So-
that's a big
But-
question mark that I haven't heard the answer to.
Right, so for years, that's what we've had to do. You have kids in your classroom, 21 years, I've had plenty of kids in my classroom, I'm like, this kid's gonna be bored. What am I going to do for them? So what I say in competency, it's based on a student growth model. So you could have a kid that comes into your class, a high school is an easy one. You come in, they take your final exam, they ace the final exam before they've ever started the class. What does that mean? They don't have to take the class? Or what do you do to enrich learning for them, to engage them and make it most powerful? One way we have at the high school are the ELOs. Those are opportunities where kids can take skills, they go out into the community, they have real life experiences. So if you look at what we're doing at this level, we've had to do that for years. Do we always do it effectively? No. We decided to start with performance assessments because competency looks different for each kid because it is a growth model. If I had talk about a music student, I don't know if I've used that one with you all yet. One of the competencies in fine arts, have you heard that one yet? About a
No.
music student, what that looks like? You have a kid, one child to make growth means they're going to be an outstanding singer. Their growth is for them to be able to perform out in the community. Maybe they get to perform at the Red Sox. They go to Carnegie School of Music. That could be a very high end to push a kid that already comes in. They've taken music lessons for years, but they still have to take music. What do you try to do for them? Band kids. A lot of kids have taken piano lessons or music lessons outside, or parents give them that support. You have another child that's never sung. They don't read music, or terrified to do a performance, but so growth for them, you could have a kid who has articulation problems, they have support devices, but for them to meet competency, one of the fine arts competencies is performs alone or with others. That's a really tough one for a kid who's nonverbal, but what if they can get on the stage, they're moving, they're trying to articulate, and it's not beautiful, but it's a beautiful auditorially, but it's a beautiful thing to see them feel confident and be performing with others. That would be a way of them meeting competence the same way another kid at the high end meets competence. So competency doesn't always look exactly the same for every kid because it's in a growth model.
And is competency being applied to our unified arts? Is that?
So
I know we keep interrupting.
Yes.
You probably might get to that. Please let you do your presentation.
We're trying to cover the quality performance assessment part as our focus this year, but these are all great questions that we want to answer. And there's design team coming up. What's that going to look like for SAU 21?
So what competency-based education looks like and what move on when ready might look like in SAU 21 and specifically here at Northampton School, we're really not sure at this point what it would look like. Looking around, trying to identify successful models across the state, there are people that have done this with various degrees of success, and we would like to learn from their experiences. Right now, really, our teachers are engaging in the competencies. We're doing workshops. They're developing the QAAs to really see how the standards, what competency is, as basically an umbrella transfer of skills that relate to the Common Core State Standards or Next Gen or whatever C3 based on what the content is. So really, we're building capacity with our teachers right now. We are certain content areas we feel like next year we'll be ready to report out on competencies so that when teachers are planning instructional opportunities, planning assessments like what we're going to show in just a moment, K to 5, I believe, will be ready to that in ELA next year. The UAs will all be ready. And then the middle school will be ready in their content areas. So it's really the teachers building a capacity and understanding around what competencies mean, how that relates to the standards structures that they're used to. And that's kind of our first confidence step, because no matter what the rest of the plan looks like, that's work that needs to be done, and it's in the best interest of the teachers and the kids.
And this is across, when you say like the K through 5th will, across the grade it will look the same.
Yes. Yes.
So do you meet with?
Here at
the-
Northampton School.
Yep. Do you meet with that team? Is that how it's working for you these days?
Yes, as well as professional development time. That's
Okay.
become
But there
probably
isn't
the.
like a weekly time where you get
There
to
is
meet?
weekly times when I meet with teachers, and we've had some other things that we've been focusing
through.
on
Yep.
during that time. But actually, just coming out of our professional development meeting on Friday, we're revisioning that piece of it. I was
That would
actually
be a
just
good,
meeting with the team
you know, in terms of
yesterday about that.
scheduling, to have you have that time with an entire team to work towards a
Yeah.
common
It's
goal.
also
if you're not
important to
there
have
with
it-
everybody.
It is, yeah, and it's also important to have it in vertical teaming as well, for example, K to 2, because really what that growth that we're looking for the students K to 2. So it's really a balance of the grade level teams, the vertical teaming, as well as, the larger, more whole faculty.
That's why you're here.
conversations.
So, yes.
I'm loving
And
it.
that's why, one reason you guys are ahead. You have someone that's dedicated to your building every single day to help that happen.
Yeah.
So if you talk about in that 5-year plan, it said, what are you getting? We started with quality performance assessments. What's the deliverable for this amount of money that we have invested? This year, we're going to have 45 quality performance assessments across the SAU with commonality, because in our PD days, we're sharing them. Northampton teachers, we meet in just with Northampton groups, but we also then meet all 4th grade teachers together, or all middle school content areas together, and we talk back and forth what's good about the assessment, we give feedback, look at the alignment of it for commonality of what's being taught, and then we come back and we revise those. So we're now in the process, and John's coming into all the schools on a routine basis, so now in January and February, our initial quality performance assessments are being given to kids. We're gonna then analyze that, grade them, and some of the schools are grading them across the whole school. So no matter what grade you teach, you are involved in the 4th grade, you're involved in the 5th grade assessment. Because what does that do? That helps us also calibrate. What does a 1, 2, 3, or 4 look like? So we get an idea across the whole school, and then across an SAU that it means the same. So these are pieces that we're chipping away at. We're then starting, in April, our April PD day, we're going to then meet cross-district schools again. Next year, they're building 3 quality performance assessments per grade level. So we have 3 plus 1 from this year, which brings us up to, I think we said, I can't say the numbers off the top of my head, but in the hundreds of quality performance assessments in a bank. We're also looking for a place to store these, that they get vetted, they go through a process. So that, just like the PACE schools do, the performance assessment, competency education. PACE schools, there's different cohorts from the state and those are tests, like they use those instead of standardized testing. They've been approved to not have to take all the standardized ones, like
That SAS.
at SBAC,
Smart.
all the things. I'm trying to be good about it. They don't have to take those because it's based on their quality performance assessments that they're doing. They're already assessing in their school. It's not an additional assessment. And I think the most powerful thing as we get to the quality performance assessments is we talk about the level. For so many years, and I did it as a teacher, we tested on knowledge and then some application. How do you apply that knowledge? Like, do you know the periodic table of elements? That's the knowledge. And then how do you apply your knowledge of O equals oxygen and positive negatives? Then you go up to the next level of synthesis. QPAs and Competency Ed really pushes for that higher level grade that you're asking about, the synthesis and then the evaluation. And we'll give you some examples in the QPAs of what that looks like and how tests are different. Okay?
Go for it.
All right, so let me show you guys what's going on, an example of what's going on at Northampton School. So a reminder about what a QPA is. That acronym is going to be thrown around a lot. We're going to be hearing that a lot. It's a huge piece of competency-based education that schools are moving forward with, no matter where they are on the continuum. And so basically, students are creating a product. And they are transferring the knowledge and skills that their teacher has taught them to create something, a new context, so that they are demonstrating their ability to transfer. So that's it's multi-step, complex skills, and they're creating or refining. So that's what a QPA is. It's very connected to project-based assessment, and project-based learning and project-based assessment are so strong here at Northampton School that the transition to doing QPAs is really not a challenging one for our teachers. This is something that they already have the skills to do really, really well. So we'll go ahead and the next one. Thank you.
So are these like summative assessments?
There, yes. Oh, look at you throwing out the word summative versus
I just
formative.
didn't
Yes,
know if
that's
they were
exactly
formative or
right.
summative,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly
No,
right.
those are
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
we're getting our
I'm being
teachers
serious
familiar
about
I've been
that.
paying
That's
attention because
awesome.
for 2 years we've been
Gold
talking about
star, Tom.
competency-based. Well, we've been talking about competency-based learning here for a long time.
Yeah. So this is an example. This is an example of an experience that students in Lindsay Lewis's second grade had this last November. So for any of you who have a second grader, you know that a huge focus of ELA for first trimester is narrative writing. That's what they focus on. You'll see that on their report cards. And this is the actual competency. So students will draw, dictate, or write. This is, of course, because it's in that K to 2 span, so we're age appropriate, to compose narrative text describing real or imaginary events or experiences. So this is what the teachers next year will be reporting out on the report card in regards to narrative writing. In order to plan for this, Ms. Lewis had lessons and formative assessments that she carefully constructed so that students are going to learn those Common Core state standards. They're going to get all the knowledge that they need, and then at the end is a summative assessment, which is the QPA. Now, that's not to say that QPAs are the only assessments summative assessments we'll be using moving forward, but it is a very, very important one for teachers to have so that they can report out on what their students know and are able to do.
So formative means all the practice work. It's all the
Yeah.
practice leading up to the summative.
Yep, and it also informs teachers' next steps. It allows them to know what their students know so they can plan accordingly, and allows the student to also know what they know and support that metacognitive skills. So around the instruction and formative assessment, so this is it speaks really nicely to what Rana was saying about how QPAs are nice and that it's a ways that teachers will very purposefully start changing what they do in the classroom if necessary, right? Because the important thing is that our students be able to transfer independently, and they provide us evidence of that. So an example of some things that, some learning lessons that Ms. Lewis provided for her students. Mentor texts, of course, that's a classic one. These are the ones that three of the ones that she used in her lessons with her students. Anchor charts, these are used in direct instruction so that as students learn, for example, the writer's craft moves or Wordsworth words, they are part of direct instruction that are then resources that are put up around the classroom so that students may access them as they're doing their work. And we actually had a guest author that came to school. I want to make sure I give the right credit. Miles's mom, I believe it was Gina Carey, came to the classroom and gave students direct instruction. She modeled for them and taught them some illustration methods, which they really, really enjoyed. So after all this instruction takes place, students had been developing, during this they've been developing their first draft of their personal narrative. And so now it's time for the QPA, which was for them to actually, her wording for it, I didn't want to lose it, to publish their personal narratives. That's the word that she used. So publishing in their personal narratives was going to be the QPA. The writing process here, the planning and first drafts, that first circle, that was really part of the instructional component. So then the QPA involved the revising, editing, illustrations, and publishing. So these were the 3 steps that the students did independently with Ms. Lewis as basically the facilitator and offering supports as needed. So here you can see the students hard at work doing just that. They were doing some very significant revisions and edits and creating the final drafts of their products. And here's what they made. So connecting back, this is the evidence that her students provided so that she could speak to how well can her students draw, dictate, write to compose a narrative text describing real or imaginary events or experiences. So this was the product, the QPA that the students developed so that she could then speak to how well students can transfer those skills. Important piece that Ron also spoke to is around how we give that feedback to students and to parents and how that's reported out on the report card, to the growth model that she spoke to. This 1, 2, 3, 4 is the rubric. Indicators are the same as those on our report card. And this specifically speaks to the structure. There was also a part of the rubric around story development and another part about the use of writing conventions. But the teacher will use the evidence that she was able to gather from the QPA and be able to speak to these components for the conversations with parents and to be able to report on the report card.
You can see the rubric descriptors there, but let me please read the words on the left from top to bottom. So overall, second is lead, transitions, ending, and lastly, organization.
So, quick question. Is this rubric, has this rubric been recently developed?
So this rubric is actually a result of the teachers' work with Lucy Calkins. So we took those rubrics and then they tweaked them a little bit to make them perfect for the Northampton students. These are based on the Common Core state standards. So the competencies are basically umbrellas that were created for skills associated with Common Core and ELA particularly. So it was already appropriate. The development of the rubrics is part of the QPA work that we're doing. And so we're coming up with some shared understandings across the SAU, as well as things that will be most appropriate for Northampton students. But the development of the rubrics to provide this feedback is part of the QPA work.
Got it. So part of the reason I'm asking is because it helps me to understand today by knowing yesterday. That work, that QPA, awesome. I think Lindsay's been doing that for a while.
Yes.
It's interesting. It's the lens. It's the lens.
Seen the book. We've done the book when
So
Cameron was
it's documented now, which is great. It's documented. It can be shared. My daughter had a wonderful experience in Lindsay's class. Love it. Love that it can be shared with others. My daughter also received a 1, 2, 3, or 4 back then without the rubric around it, which created some confusion. So I think this is going to be a big help tying back with the QPA.
And actually, in speaking with, it might have been the second grade or maybe the first grade team, second grade team, I think it was, on Friday when we were doing our QPA and rubric work, they would like to make a child-friendly version of this as well. Obviously, that language isn't going to mean a lot to a second grader, but using even instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 words there, having facial expressions or so having the one for teachers and for parents, but as well as developing as appropriate ones for students as well.
So if we talk about it from an SAU 21 lens, 4 out of 6 schools had professional development on Friday. I was with a 6th grade team here at Northampton for part of it, and they were doing rubric work too. Went over to Seabrook, they were working on their rubrics. Then people will be able to use those because that's like, what are you assessing and how are you assessing it? That's the part that's been missing. So for a kid to understand why they got the score, you just get a number on a page or, like you said, a 4 on the page. And well, that's what I'm getting to that part. And you don't know what that means. You never knew how to fix it unless it was read it up or whatever. So the part that's been really helpful is why are competencies important? And it'll tie into my board report a little. It's for parents. It is for students and for parents. So you worry about who else sees them. It's for you to know. How do you want to support your kid? How can your daughter do better? Well, if you look at the competencies, it's going to show you. My own children would come home from in a competency world and say, Mom, before you look, don't go online and look at the portal. You need to know. I know I have 2s in these 2 competencies, but this is what I'm doing to fix it. So great. That was a true ownership for their learning, and that's what we want to build, that culture here, and that takes time. John Vanderel's in his work in Sanborn, they were at for 10 years before they got there. Luckily, we can learn from them in the schools that have done this, the high schools going through the version, and we can get there faster than they did.
We all need more I can statements.
Touche, exactly what we need. Yes, students will, and I can.
Right, I know.
And we're working on teasing those out, and they come out in the rubric. So that's why we chose QPAs. It were a natural evolution for us to force all the other things to happen. Because if you give a QPA and your students don't do well, you need to be introspective and be like, wow, why didn't my students do well? I thought this was awesome. So that makes you look at the assessment. Was the assessment not really assessing the competencies I wanted it to? Or did my instruction, do I need to change the assessment? Do I need to change my instruction? Or was the rubric inaccurate? And yeah, the kid killed it based on my rubric. My rubric wasn't really addressing what I was truly trying to assess. So I think it's a pretty powerful tool. I said that, what might this look like at another grade level?
Can I ask you one question before you go on? So that rubric and those stories, so what would the parents have seen? Would they have seen that grading rubric circled wherever the child was on each of those?
I don't know if she sent, did she
I
send
can
it home? can't
probably
speak to
answer.
that.
I can answer that too.
Yes, yes, you're going to see the rubric. And just also speaking from like what's happening right now in fourth grade, is it comes home ahead of time. Like there was a packet for
Yes.
the fourth graders, and it's like, this is the book that they're reading. This is what they, their project is and their goals of their project. And attached to that is the rubric. And as a parent,
Yeah.
I'm seeing that, 2 months before the project's due, or 6 weeks before the project's due. And there's mini rubrics that go along with like a timeline. Like at this point, you should be here and you should have completed up to, X, Y, and Z. And to add on to it, the 7th grade team has taken it a step further. They actually have their peers review their work and grade based on the rubric. So what Cameron has a lot of times coming home is how she assesses herself on the rubric,
Yes,
how a
self-assessment
peer
is
has
huge,
assessed her, and then how the teacher assesses her. And I think that it not only helps the students to see what other kids' work, what they're turning in, but she can assess herself and see where she stands. And it is a rubric that they have presented at the beginning of the project.
And that's what I was talking about. The secret's gone as to what you're expected to do in that old study guide. You have it right up front. If you want to get a 4, this is what you need to do, and you have a lot of feedback in that formative work to get the 4.
So just to be clear, though, we might be doing this more frequently, but this isn't new.
No.
My son is a junior at Winnacunnet, and I had Lindsay Lewis, she was doing this.
Yeah, so project-based
like
learning and
8
project-based assessment
years
are not
ago.
new,
Yes,
right?
she's just now filling out
Yeah.
a piece of paper.
No, she was doing rubrics.
No, but I know having a rubric, but just like
Capturing
making
the
it
curriculum.
more
We're capturing the curriculum
saying,
for
like,
consistency
what points
across
am I hitting
classrooms.
with this?
It's the way that the difference between competencies and standards is, of course, the competencies are more of a general transfer of a set of skills. So it's a more open-ended than necessarily reporting out on a standards-based report card about individual skills for a student, but more about a group of, there are a lot of skills, as you saw on that rubric, that contribute to the narrative writing. So what we'll see on the report card is a report back on the competency, and it's really looking at the student's ability to transfer that. ELA, I think, has always lended itself more to that. So I think as we think through our students' experiences, those will come up more often. You'll see this, I see it happening right now in our science classrooms. I see it happening right now in our math classrooms. There's a 5th grade math classroom a few weeks ago where they were doing this. So it's really becoming ingrained in all content areas, a part of all content areas, as opposed to those that maybe lent itself to it more easily. But again, I have to say that here at Northampton School, this has been a part of best practice for a long time. It's just changing the lens of how we report out on it, and maybe perhaps how we structure the learning events that lead up to it.
And together consistency.
It's guaranteed to happen in both classes.
Yes.
Together consistency. Yep.
Yes.
Because before it could have
Commonality.
happened in one, not in the other,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yep,
Yes.
and really the building up of the independence too. And I think, while students, project-based learning is different than the project-based assessment component of it. So also as students are engaging with this more and as they're coming up through the grades, the ability to do so independently and as an assessment is building. So that's a little bit of a shift as well.
And to add on to the advancement, what we were talking about earlier, it did apply in a certain instance last year in language arts, where Cameron, she doesn't mind me using her name, did well.
Student X.
Did very
Someone I
well
know.
multiple times in Mrs. Johnson's class on her rubric. And at that point, she was given the rubric she was in 6th grade, the 7th
Mm-hmm.
grade class, because that was going to push her
Mm-hmm.
to a more advanced level. So that was provided to her last year.
Yeah,
and that's
very often
the
the
advancement.
content can be the same, but what they're asking students to do with it can be modified to personalize
So
and
what might
advance
this
them.
look like at another
Yes,
grade
that's
level?
exactly what I'm saying. So here's an example of that and what it could look like. So I'll stick with language arts because all of us have done language arts tests. A novel that almost everyone has read might be To Kill a Mockingbird. Whatever grade level you read it in, most people have read that. And why do you use it? Too often you would hear people say, I taught that novel. I've already taught that. But you don't teach a novel. In theory, those are just resources we use to teach competencies and to teach skills. So old tests might be who's the author of the book, what's the setting of the story, who are the main characters. And what that would now look like is, and if a kid were absent from school one day or you were on a vacation for a week, you go to take the test on To Kill a Mockingbird and you didn't read them or you weren't there for class discussion, you potentially might not do well on the book at all. You could bomb, the kids say, Mom, I was in the guidance office that day. I didn't do well because I missed that portion of the test.
Well,
So-
if you didn't read it, you're probably not going to do good on it.
Well,
There's no competency
no,
model
but
that's
no,
gonna flip
no, but well, here's part of it. You aren't really teaching the book. You should be using the books to teach
The skills.
the skills, to teach the
skills.
language arts content versus just the novel. So you want common text, you can have common conversations. But what would an assessment like this look like? You would take, for example, let's say, I think To Kill a Mockingbird is great for characterization. Harper Lee does so well in helping people understand the characters. So you're using the whole time, you're talking about character development, etc. So an assessment might be you give a cold read, an excerpt of a group of characters, 2 or 3 pages, or they read that on their own over a period of days. And then you tell them they can pick any piece of writing that they want to, piece of literature that they want to. They might have chosen it on their own. They might have read it in another grade. They might have whatever they want. And you're asking them to talk about the author's development of character in each piece. So in this cold read, they're having to transfer the knowledge that you used To Kill a Mockingbird to teach, apply that to this cold read, which you're then being able to see their reading comprehension, their ability to analyze that piece of text, and then to transfer it into something else, a text to text, another piece of text that they're familiar with, and talk about it. Which author developed the character better and why? So that they're able, if you miss part of whatever novel, that's not as important. And people will say, well, how do you grade that paper? You can't have read every example they might have used, which is true. They could totally ad-lib a lot of it, but it doesn't matter. If they're truly able to compare the 2 pieces of text, they're able to talk about it, talk about character development, use the terms that we discussed in class, that strong development using setting, or it could be comparing how setting in one story, if you switch the setting of To Kill a Mockingbird with the setting of Peyton Place, how might those stories change? Whatever it is you're teaching, you're using that piece of text. That's the highest level of learning, where we're getting up to an evaluative, comparative piece, where they're taking and demonstrating and transferring their knowledge. So that's an example of how we're using QPAs or how they're different than the tests or types of assessments we've always had. Pretty powerful. And I did the math. We will have 190 quality performance assessments next year, not including the high school. And I went with those averages because in a lot of schools, some of them are choosing to do cross-curricular or cross-grade level. There's one on measurement in Hampton Falls that's kindergarten through 3rd grade, so they've scaffolded the measurement. So for a kid that's on the higher end, they will have this ability versus a kid on a lower end. Do you meet their needs where they're at?
Yeah, you should have 191 because Lindsay's was already in existence.
But not with the rubrics, et cetera.
Yeah,
So-
actually, we do have several, we have many that
people
are
are
being
doing
developed
that.
right
It's
now in
low-hanging fruit, I'm
Northampton
only
that
kidding.
aren't associated with the numbers in
I want a
John Vander House.
deliverable for you. So those are the numbers we said. Here's our deliverables. This is something you will have.
We have many deliverables. So on the competency that Becca was describing for Lindsay Lewis's class, I saw that same competency measured by a QPA in a kindergarten class today. So, and the students, the kindergarten students wrote at a developmentally appropriate level. They wrote for 20 minutes. That
In their
was,
chairs?
it was impressive.
That is
It
impressive.
was impressive.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. A lot more to come on that, we know.
Yes.
Any other questions on? Any other questions right now, I should say? Okay.
Call or
Okay,
email,
thank you.
I'd
Yeah,
be happy
thank you.
to get back with you or come.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we are going to move on. Under continuing business, we have board goals. I will note that this was an important part of one of our goals about communicating competency education to parents, so thank you very much for that. I know work has been ongoing with Maura Hart. She was here last week for our
And-
PD day.
Yes, she was. She was here Monday morning and throughout the day on Friday.
And we are working to schedule a meeting with her and the board.
Okay.
There's some back and forth going on dates right now. I checked in with the superintendent's office today about that, so we should have that soon. We know we got a survey, hopefully everyone got that, but we were gonna have an in-person meeting coming up soon.
Yes, my understanding is bracketed around the February 21st meeting.
Was Dr. Hart with the middle school, the elementary school, or both on Friday?
Both.
Gotcha, thank you.
Separately, we had a K to 5.
I got,
and-
right, gotcha.
They rotated.
Our next item is the appointment of an SAU 21 Policy Committee representative. So as you know, the joint board has set up a committee to work on policy updates and consistency within the SAU. So each of the boards is supposed to designate a member of that committee.
I'm up for reelection, so I don't think I can do it.
As am I.
Do we have any volunteers?
What's the time commitment? You know?
I don't
Only
know.
for
I wanna say-
availability.
I want
Yeah.
to say that's approximately,
Asking for Erin.
looking at,
He's asking for Erin.
I want to say that he said approximately once a month at this portion, but there could be longer meetings, like looking at chunks of, so there's some policies that are mandated that we have that we're behind on, and this has been particularly busy time in the legislature the past couple years, where districts that aren't behind on theirs are just swamped with policies. But we're hoping that the person on this committee, we can then pass like large groups at once, because this person speaks for the whole team and can come back and bring it to the board, and that we can get them through.
So I'll.
I mean, we could always do Tom and then have an alternate.
I'll have the time, and I'm happy to do it. You just need to know that the voters will, right?
I think you'd be exceptional.
It's your thing.
It is.
It's
It's
something
totally
that
your
you
thing.
like.
Well, it's not my
And
thing.
you're gonna run it.
No, but you're good.
It's not my.
I nominate Tom.
It's a multi-year
I can do it.
All right.
committee, so.
I'll second that
everyone's,
motion.
Yeah.
Third.
And you could take turns. Just send an alt if you
Any
can't
further
go.
discussion?
Yes, we need to make catch-up
All
growth
those in favor
with
of
our
a nomination,
policies.
appointing Tom?
Who made the motion?
Erin, I seconded. Actually, if we want to designate an alternate, I'll volunteer to be that for, I know scheduling is less of a problem for me sometimes than others, so.
Once a month is doable as long as they're
I want to say,
flexible.
don't quote me on that, but I'm
You know.
pretty sure that that was
Okay.
a feeling
All
I
right,
was
well,
getting.
let's see how it plays out. We can always make
Thank you. Got my homework assignment.
I'm gonna put up some
At the end of the
signs
meeting,
around
Tom's gonna tell me,
around town
you're
on
gonna
your
tell me you
behalf.
can't make the
Yeah.
first
Please
meeting
vote.
and I'm going as the alternate already?
Total
So
Your
Erin,
re-election
you-
signs are gonna say, please re-elect Tom, so we don't have to do the rest of our stuff.
For the alt, is that gonna be a
I don't think
official?
so. I
Okay.
don't,
We
well,
just get enough write-ins, it doesn't.
just as needed. All right, moving on to new business. The first item we have is the withdrawal of funds from Building Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund. We had the public hearing on this item earlier. In your packets, there is, on the PA system, you have a memo from Matt about the two bids. Matt, do you want to speak to those briefly?
Certainly. So we did conduct a formal RFP process for the PA system, and we received 2 bids back. These are both vendors that we've used at other schools, Seabrook and Winnicott. They did come in lower than we had initially anticipated, which is a good thing. So we are recommending award of bid to Williams Communications Services for the amount of $8,744. Now, it is important to note that the withdrawal from the expendable trust includes an additional $1,917, and I included 24 cents there, down to the penny.
Just
And that is for to include clocks with because the existing PA system has the clocks embedded in it. The new PA system does not, so we do need to make that purchase as well.
Atomic clocks, 20-year clocks.
Okay, good.
25 years, I'm not sure.
So we're going to first vote to withdraw the money from the trust fund, and then we'll subsequently vote to award the bid. So,
That's not connected to the PA system.
I didn't
It's
think so.
battery operated.
yes.
I move that we authorize the withdrawal of $10,661.24 from the Northampton Building Maintenance Expendable Trust for the replacement of the school intercom system and clocks.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Great, thank you very much. And now we will move on to the award of bids. Actually, 2 bids. Why don't we just do the PA system one first, since you just spoke to it, Matt? As Matt said, recommending the Williams Communication Services. and-
I move that we award the bid for the PA systems to Williams Communication Services in the amount of $8,744.
second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. And I just, thank you, Matt. Again, I just wanted to note that that came in at much less than we were fearing it would cost, so pleased to see that. Next item is award of bids for the roof project that we have pending.
Yeah, so we the bid process for the proposed roof replacement did go to RFP. Bids were sent to 3 vendors, and 3 attended the walkthrough and subsequently submitted bids. As you can see, there's a fairly wide gap in the pricing. This is, I mean, it's significant. It goes between, it's $33,000, $49,000, and $80,000. I wish I could say that this was this is uncommon, but when it comes to shingle roof, we see this a lot. It really comes down to demand and the ability of the contractor to fulfill the job. Oftentimes we'll see this outlier because they have, right now, there's plenty of business for these contractors, so they'll throw out this huge bid because they don't really want the job, but if they get it, then they'll take it.
So the materials are the same.
So this we use, as you know, we use a consultant, ARM, who designs the roof specs, which is in excess of 100 pages. Because the other part of this is we really need qualified bidders for roofing. That's something that you can get in a lot of trouble with. There's a lot of shortcuts when it comes to roofing. There's a lot of there's a varied, a large degree of variation when it comes to the materials and how, the subroof and the flashing and whatnot. So, ARM develops those specifications, then then they provide us qualified bidders. They make recommendations, because obviously anyone can bid, on whether the contractor is qualified, and then they will be on site to manage the process and oversee the actual work that's being done. So the administration is recommending award of bid to Ridge Runner Construction in the amount of $33,170. And this is contingent upon passage of the proposed warrant article that's going on ballot in this March.
When is this gonna take place, the roof? If this passes?
So, that's to be determined.
Yep.
And some of it's weather related. I mean,
Yep.
technically, if weather's cooperating and it passes in March, we could try to schedule it as early as April. That's unlikely though. It'll probably be at the end of
Summer.
the school year.
Yep.
So.
And has another school used Bridge Runner Construction?
Yes. So we have used this company in the past, and actually, Southampton has just awarded another bid to this company as well, and they will be doing their work in April. So.
Okay.
And I also, one last note on this project, a portion of this bid is the garage roof. So there is an alternate here, if you see alternate 2, the garage roof, that is contingent upon the long-term long-term maintenance warrant article passing as well. So.
But the school that you mentioned, you said another school has used them in the past, you're not referring to Southampton?
No,
Board, you're
no,
referring to.
no, we've used
It's
them in
stood the
past.
test of time.
Right.
What part of the roof are we up for right now?
This is the back side of the front main building. The
Okay.
shingled part of going across the front, the back, right, the back side of it.
Back
and
side
then-
and the front, and then it's like an L.
It's like an L.
It goes,
Yeah. And it's the second to last section of roof to be
Of
replaced.
5.
Of at
5
least
sections.
5.
At least 5.
Our roof diagram is like
Trying
a
to think of the
jigsaw
map
puzzle.
in my head.
Starting in, I want to say 2010 maybe, somewhere around there.
Thereabouts.
All the sections,
Yep.
there, multiple sections have been replaced. There's one, after this, there'd be one more section. Then theoretically, based on the guarantees we have, we should go 20 years
Right.
at least without having to do any more roof.
and the last section, I believe, is on the capital improvement plan for, I think it's 4 years out. So it's not, it won't be coming up next year, but it's a few years out, so.
Actually, so I kind of made a joke about the gym,
Yeah.
but how is the gym roof that leaks all the time? Is it? I haven't heard any complaints about it. So
It doesn't leak all the time.
okay.
Only when it rains.
It's not predictable.
Sometimes when it doesn't rain.
It's not predictable, I think, been here a year and a half, so it's directional. So what direction is the storm coming from, the wind direction plays a part into it. And
So once in a while,
water finds a way,
Seems
and when
to-
it does
yeah.
find a way, it leaks in maybe 12 places. But one in particular by the divider with the music room,
It seems to be,
Okay.
but there's also suspicion it's coming in through a piece of equipment on the roof, not just that there's a
Yeah.
problem with the roof membrane. And then it
Yeah.
goes,
Yeah.
gets
Yeah,
under
finds
and
like
goes
a-
in directions, so.
Haven't
it
had it
it
assessed.
has not,
Yes.
it has not been a
Many
chronic,
times.
it has not been a chronic debilitating, putting NHYA or other activities out problem this winter.
Yep.
So, that being said, we know it leaks.
See what happens
I mean, it
tomorrow.
Tonight.
has,
See what happens tonight.
within the last couple of months. I mean,
It has leaked a couple times within the last couple of months,
Okay.
yes. And we
It's the
have,
primary reason why
we've
John
worked around
Limoges
it.
has moved on to Winnicott. It is the bane of his existence. Yes.
When
Did
it's,
the company do that roof?
This
No.
was a roof that was done in 1996. And it has since been redone. However, the original problem, which we have been having trouble identifying what the actual problem is, was 96. So.
Okay.
so there, yes, there's more work to be done than just re-roofing it again, definitely.
All right,
do a
do we have a
flat roof.
motion?
All right,
England.
I
In New
move that
England.
we award the roof replacement project to Ridge Runner Construction at the amount of $33,170.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you very much. All right, moving on. You have another memo from Matt in your packet about school nutrition department and structure. So, Matt.
Right, so due to some recent turnover in the school nutrition department, we have been presented with an opportunity to kind of take a different look at our organizational structure within the nutrition department. This actually has been a long time coming, as far as our nutrition director has had this in mind for the last couple of years, and has kind of been waiting for the opportunity to make this type of change. So currently, we have 2 head cooks. So we call them school nutrition worker 2s, and there's a lot of overlap when it comes to that position. And so our school nutrition director feels it makes more sense to have a single head cook and then an assistant cook below that person who can and have delineate the duties and the roles and responsibilities a little better, and just create a more efficient kitchen. Additionally, we currently have a dishwasher position, which, as you recall, last year we added this position due to the schedule. This year, the schedule has changed such that the position is not necessary. We feel that we can cover any sort of dishwashing with the existing staff. So in short, we're looking at redefining the school nutrition 2 worker to a school nutrition 1 worker, and then removing the dishwasher position. I've included in the packet the proposed revised job descriptions for each of those positions. And we do anticipate a savings of $5,000. Now, this does dovetail somewhat nicely with our new green team, our recycling committee that has started up this year, because there are some potential added costs when it comes to some of the recycling initiatives that we plan on going forward with. That when I say cost, it's supply. So we use plastic and styrofoam, and we're looking at converting over to more biodegradable materials and being more environmentally friendly, and that will it's not a significant amount of money, but that will be a cost. So be happy to answer any questions in regard to this structure.
Will we make this change right away then? Because we do have a vacant, I noted that we have a vacancy in that second school nutrition worker 2 position, so we'd immediately change that to a school nutrition worker 1 and try to hire to that?
Correct. So
Okay.
right now, it's currently posted as the school nutrition
2 or 1?
the one that we're proposing.
The 1?
One.
Okay.
Assistant
Nutrition worker, okay.
Assistant cook.
So I guess I have 2 questions. One is, what changed? Because it was really important that we get this extra part-time person in last year. So what's changed to make the need no longer be there? And looking down the road, are we going to see that we have the need later that we don't have now? That's my first one.
Right, so it was I believe it's the length and the overlap. Eric, you can probably speak to the
Yeah, just
actual-
let me speak to it briefly. So the nature of the scheduling and how elementary grade levels and the middle school kind of coalesced around lunch and recess times last year made the atmosphere environment what that expected out of our food service people to be much more manic, much more intense. So they had to get more work done in a shorter period of time. So, and we live with the schedule as it had been set. To a greater or lesser extent, we certainly did make some changes. So, and we've just simply tried to make it a calmer environment during lunch, and we have a 10-minute stagger, and people can get the number of trays washed that they need to get washed in between cycles of grades coming in there, and they simply could not
The
without.
schedule got lengthened out,
Yeah,
right?
so
Correct, without an additional person.
Yeah, so are students having lunch extra early or extra late as a result?
No, that the middle school kids, the 7th and 8th graders, still eat at the same time as the 7th and 8th graders. Last year, our first lunch starts at 11:05, which is ironically, given the nature of what I'm articulating right now, 5 minutes after the first lunch last year. So every 10 minutes, we have another grade come in, other than 7th and 8th grade, which comes in at the same time. Last year, we would have 2 or even 3 grades. The most intense period was 3 grades coming in within 5 minutes of each other. Okay, so kind of paint that picture, and our capacity to do what we need to
So
do.
they're coming in at overlapping times at a steadier pace instead of
Very-
in
Yeah,
huge
gotcha.
clumps.
Huge,
and
huge influx.
Okay,
That's right, that's right.
Seems sensible.
all right.
And then my second question is, so can we fill the positions with the current staff, or are we hiring somebody in, and someone that's currently in one of these roles, the role's eliminated? I'm just making sure. I know we have an opening,
One of the 2's left.
Well, we have
but we
the
have it posted as
the
well.
dishwasher position is vacant,
Okay,
and we have a vacancy for one of the head cooks. So we're
So
switching that
people
to
that are here
assistant cook and
stay
hiring
here.
that.
they're just
Yeah.
different job titles,
Yeah.
different expectations. So with that, if it's different job title, different expectation, do we have to post it? And do people have to apply, or can you plug it in?
Yeah, we don't have the people.
There's
We don't
2
have-
vacancies.
We've had,
There's 2.
Yes.
we've had
I
one
apologize.
resignation,
So-
which necessitates a hire.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so I caught on now, thank you.
And I did speak with Mrs. Fields, and she was all on board on that this is what's really best for the
Yeah.
school and
This precipitated from.
her.
Yeah, totally get it. I'm not pushing back on it. I just wanted to make sure.
We asked a similar question, because we don't wanna come back and
Right.
ask to add a position in
Yep.
3 months. We wanna make sure this is a sustainable model. That being said, should the schedule change in future years, that dishwasher position is the most, I guess, the least impact to the budget, where we could, it's a couple hours, lowest cost, so we could more easily hire for that position and absorb it in the budget.
The agenda doesn't say vote required, but is this something we need to vote on?
I think it'd be appropriate for the.
Seems like it, since we're changing a job, and
Right.
so.
I move
Sorry,
that,
sorry, Aaron, you had.
Who created the position descriptions?
So that comes from, you mean the title?
Well, just the, like, the
job
whole.
descriptions.
The job
Who did- yeah.
descriptions.
The whole description comes from, it comes between HR and Paul.
Oh, very detailed.
Yes.
But I would,
I know.
Those?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
I move that we accept the new LEAP proposed school nutrition department structure as outlined by Matt Ferrara on his memo, January 24th, 2019.
A second.
Greg got it, man.
Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Just trying to get in there.
Gotta be snappy. All right. Next item is the acceptance of a gift. Becca, your name's on here, so I'm gonna ask you if you could
Oh,
explain this
absolutely.
gift.
Yes, absolutely. This is, Subaru has a corporate initiative every year for charity. And this year, we were the beneficiaries of McGovern Subaru's donation of fantastic STEM books. So they're really reviewed books that were collected and brought to the building to be disseminated into classroom libraries. So the science committee was able to go through the books, determine the most appropriate reading level, age level, connection to curriculum, and to put those into the teachers' classrooms for student use.
As I recall, the board heard about the receipt
Yes.
of these books at the November meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the technicality of actually deciding to receive these books, accept this gift, we hadn't taken care of that, so.
All right.
I thought we did
I
too.
thought we did.
I thought we did. I thought that was,
I-
I wasn't here for it, but
That was-
yeah.
We did. Sean Dion was here.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
I thought too.
Okay.
Do we accept it again?
Just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in case there's some.
I move that we accept the donation from the Govern Subaru of science books with gratitude at the amount of $1,200.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. All right.
This form wasn't signed.
Um,
This got- when it-
Job descriptions, we have 3. These were sent around earlier, I believe. Yes, I think we've received these via email, yeah. So we have 3 positions to review and approve. One is, as we know, Rana is leaving us at the end of the year. One is for the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. One is for the position we approved at the Joint Board for the Director of Student Services. And one is for another position we approved at the Joint Board for Student Information Systems Manager and Database Administrator, a mouthful. So I believe we're looking for any questions or comments, and then looking for approval for these from all the boards. So let's start with the first one, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Any questions? No.
Comment, I would like to say that I'm happy that there's a description here, because otherwise this is so thick with detail that you wonder what the priorities are. Therefore, the description works hard to prioritize the work.
It's very extensive. All right. Do we have a motion?
I move that we accept the job description for the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment as presented.
A second.
Which one is it?
Right.
Who'd you get, Maureen?
Right.
She was looking right at me. I had made eye contact early, 'cause I knew
All those in favor? Thank you. Director of Student Services, do you have a motion?
I move that we accept the job description for the Director of Student Services as presented.
Second.
Who'd you give that one to, Maureen?
Yes, I got a point. Okay.
Trying to make them match.
Any questions or comments, discussion about this job description? No? All those in favor? I will note for those watching these, we have several of these searches are underway. I know we have a couple of members who are participating on those searches, so
Yes.
it sounds like they're moving along.
Yeah, so these job descriptions isn't the first time
No.
We've seen this.
we've seen this.
No. Everyone had seen them, they just
Yeah.
didn't get formally adopted by a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, just for
See
the
these.
That's what we're doing.
standing room
electronic.
only crowd and
Oh, for
folks
the
at
crowd,
home.
yeah.
Yeah, we want to have the,
Know that we've
but also to have them finalized for when the final hiring decisions are made. And finally, we have the Student Information Systems Manager.
I move that we accept the job description as written for the Student Information Systems Manager and Database Administrator.
second.
Discussion, all those in favor? Thank you very much. All right. On to our written reports. Dr. Lupini's report is in here. If you have any questions, we can address them to Rana or Matt, or,
Can we go back to one
Yeah.
quick thing on the new business stuff?
Yeah.
Just
On the new what?
new business. I've got 2 questions and an update. The update is that the New Hampshire School Board Assembly is this weekend. I will be representing Northampton. I will come back with information. And then the second thing is the budget FAQ document. Is there a process that we're going to follow for sharing that with the community? There's a lot of work there, a lot of good information. Just didn't know what the next step is now that we have that.
So, do you have a plan?
Well, I mean, I hadn't decided, but I could share it out, but that's a certain segment of the community. But I'd be happy to share it out in a message.
So in
Which
an
we'll have a
email
couple of
to parents? Is that
To
what you're
all
talking
parents, guardians, and family.
about? And then I
family
would say
members.
that should be posted in our news article on the website. And then
Yes.
within the Friday folder for the general community. You know, the
Yeah.
Friday the town
The
Friday.
town.
Oh, with the town,
Friday-
yes.
Town
Talk to
Friday
Jan,
folder.
and she could include it in
Yeah,
next
like a
week's
link.
Friday.
Jan
Friday folder.
Scipione would take that and put that in.
Jan Fasella,
Jan Fasella.
yes.
Oh, right, she was
Right.
full curriculum coordinator.
I just didn't want that to go.
No, thank you,
No,
I had
thank
that on
you.
my notes too.
Yep.
And then the second thing on new business is that I saw in the PAL agenda that they were talking about field trip funding. And assuming that that is now off their plate, as we talked about at the last school board meeting, it means that PAL will now have resources for enrichment. Is there a process for notifying the teachers how to request that? Or does each teacher go to PAL individually, or should it go through the administration?
We'll facilitate that. So the messaging and communication is very important for our teachers and staff to understand that PAL is going to help to fund and supplement funding for exciting opportunities for kids.
Yeah.
Just not the field trips, that's going to be with the general budget. So we'll work on that messaging so that the teachers understand and we'll work through with the teachers, beginning through this week. We have a faculty meeting on February 6th. We have a leadership council meeting the following week. So by the next PAL meeting, we should have a paired list of priorities by grade or grade span, of opportunities that teachers would like to see PAL help to provide supplemental funds for.
Would those
So-
go through leadership council?
Well, potentially, it's definitely a curriculum instruction and assessment, it's in that bailiwick, if you will. So that makes sense. So that's why Leadership Council would be involved in the discussion of teachers' ideas. And then, we have a grade level representative at Leadership Council for
And
each grade.
then prioritize which ones are.
Yeah, and certainly we can't fund everything, or PAL cannot fund everything. PAL, at their meeting this evening, thought they would have somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,500 or less that had been earmarked for K through 5, primarily field trips, for this school year, and that they could be reallocated this year for this spring.
And what about the money, or any monies that they had set aside for the middle school trips, which it's not going to be used?
They really hadn't. So PAL's funding of middle school trips
Yeah.
has been on an
Downward?
individualized basis over the years. So there had not been, at least in the recent past, a significant ask of PAL to help supplement those trips.
So one last thing on this, there may be a big disconnect in the community about what some of the fundraisers were for, and thinking that they were going towards field trips. You may want to work with PAL as a school administration to rebrand and recommunicate what the fundraisers are for and how the money's being used, if you want the money to keep coming. Otherwise, I think it'll just fizzle out and go away.
Well said. And we had Becca and I had a meeting with PAL president this week, and then the follow-up discussion that you alluded to, Tom, at the PAL meeting this evening. So,
Okay.
so we'll be working on that.
We're hoping that this will generate more enthusiasm around PAL, and I believe it has great potential to do so.
So the vision of STEAM-related enrichment opportunities for all kids K through 8, and that is PAL's area of focus and emphasis. I think people can they could get their arms around that.
So something
So
like
more
the Artist in
significant.
Residence program,
Exactly.
we could use money towards
Perfect.
that would be.
Yep.
like the-
We discussed that specifically, that
Good.
example.
Yep.
Thank you.
Two more kids.
All right.
Thank you, James.
Sure. So superintendent's report, if we have any questions, we can.
Dr. Lupini actually asked me
Oh.
to just briefly
Thank you.
point out a few updates to his report.
Thank you.
Um,
Go ahead.
So he did indicate in the report that we were working with Mr. Richard Kane, who is the coordinator of school and safety and security at SCU 16. He's also the former police chief in Exeter. And Dr. Lupini and Mrs. Milbury, who's the principal at Seabrook Middle School, were able to meet with Richard Kane and resulted in the following plan. So Mr. Kane will be working to schedule Homeland Security facility audits. And this is an expectation that this occurs every 3 years. So these will occur in each of our buildings by the end of 2019. The last security audit that we did have done was in 2016, so we are on schedule. Dr. Lupini and Mrs. Milbury also attended the last SAU 16 Safety and Security Task Force meeting yesterday. And this was to learn how their group functions and really determine whether that's something that SAU 21 is looking to establish to serve our emergency needs. So the purpose of this group is to bring together representatives from police, fire, school boards, and other stakeholders, and is charged with the development of coordinated strategies for the schools. So this is probably another committee that we will be looking to bring forth. Additionally, we will make certain that all principals and our other school leaders are trained in the appropriate incident command FEMA training modules. We will also be making certain that all our employees have taken part in the 3 phases of ALICE training. This consists of classroom, online, and drill training. We are also looking at creating a behavior intervention team for the SAU. This team is charged with designing a proactive approach to deal with student behaviors before they escalate to situations that would demand emergency preparedness. Finally, we are expecting that Mr. Kane will attend our next joint board meeting, and he'll discuss his work that we're currently engaging in and moving forward. Dr. Lupini also want to thank Greg Duffy and Aaron Stanton for participating on the screening committees for the Assistant Superintendent and Director of Student Services committees, as well as Tom Von Jess for participating on the policy.
Was that a fill in the blank?
A big thanks for that.
Played.
All right, thank you. All right, Assistant Superintendent Rana, thank you.
So I referred a little bit to my report in our earlier presentation on competency ed. And as you guys have probably seen a pattern, I try to highlight something different on competency each month, which does align with your board goal, but also do this across other districts. So this month I chose to put some research based articles in here, or excerpts from articles that came from a couple different places. And this one was talking about transcripts. Because as kids are doing coursework and looking at colleges right now, that's a bigger question that a lot of parents have. So in competency education, what do transcripts look like? And how does that affect us? So right now at Winnicott, we have dual. We have a traditional transcript that has GPA, class, I don't know if they have class rank, but all the traditional pieces, your average, but you also can get a competency report. So what I found was really interesting and that thought people might want to share is, considering our goals, and then how does that relate to Edutopia? What does Edutopia say about it in Competency Works? So I included some excerpts for you to look at, and that ironically was very interesting to me that more and more colleges, and we worry about, can our kids be as competitive? Can they get into high-level schools based on competencies? And they're reporting that even down to, and I'm going right under the pictures, that New England Secondary School Consortium collected data, and they said that 70 private and public institutions across New England, so including Harvard, Dartmouth, MIT, Tufts, Bowdoin, that they are used to reading about competencies. And I thought that you could, if you, the live link in the electronic version you got, you can actually click on that and see all the different schools that are using it. But in addition to, they said over 150 top private high schools in the United States, including Phillips Exeter and Dalton, are also used to looking at competencies and do not have a problem with it. And what I pulled from is that they feel like they're able to get more information about a student. because you oftentimes have students that do very well, could be valedictorian, salutatorian, but then they have a really hard time functioning because they're so good at content that they don't have all the other skills that we've talked a lot about, those dispositions or those work habits, habits of mind, or student learning expectations, meaning they don't communicate well. They don't have interpersonal skills. They have a harder time with critical thinking, a harder time with collaborating, and that in a competency-based world, when we are also reporting out on behavior separate from a content grade, that gives them sometimes a better picture of how a kid could potentially be successful in college. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So and I said, as we continue to prepare our kids, that will be something that we want to look at, And I did include the links in here so you can look at those full articles if you want an electronic version that you received from Rhonda. So then I began to talk a little bit, which we talked about a lot tonight, some of our competency work, where we are with, excuse me, our quality performance assessments. I gave a couple examples, how the one on measurement, some integrated social emotional learning on the book movie Frenemies, and then in art there's one on self-portraits. And these, I thought all three of those examples cut across curriculum areas, so they were some neat ones to share as well. I talked also a little bit about the grant training. And I mentioned it last month because it happened just prior to coming to your meeting. Continue to look at the grant work and have written several grants this month for different schools and collaborated with the administrators so we can continue to, who's on the evaluation committee from here? Any of you as board members, the teacher evaluation committee? Well, in profession, so we're looking at, and
We'll take a quick vote if you want.
oh, I wasn't sure if one of you were board reps for that. So what we've been looking at is, again, in building our economies of scales, how do we use our monies? So I have, and I've been auditing all that, and I had a sub-grant committee meeting one day this week, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, with administrators to be like, what do we want? If we go forward, so in the teacher evaluation, we're looking at if you want to take courses or do things, in the collective bargaining agreement, I think it was in it. How do they relate to the district goals, then the building goals, and our professional development? They don't get money for just anything per se, that it needs to be connected to the work that we want to have done throughout the SAU. So we're also looking at in the grant, what percent, right now, all of our grants are spread out. They're overseen by each individual school. So we don't necessarily, oftentimes we'll sit at board meetings and hear about, and this isn't critiquing anyone, this is just an audit of our processes, and then hear about how people are going to spend their grant money or what they're doing for professional development. So the Professional Development Committee, in conjunction, we're trying to build a big circle, tighten things up, align as an SAU. So I had the committee meet and say, what could we look at? What percentage of your grants would you be able to dedicate to? 80% goes to SAU-wide goals, and 20% you can do in your building. That's just an example. Mm-hmm. Like, what could we do? So we're starting those conversations as well to get the most bang for our buck. And could we get more money by consolidating all of SAU 21 versus giving the money by school? So looking into that, would it be more beneficial? Because some SAUs do oversee all the grants. We want to maintain the local control and have that input. So just looking at what possibilities are there and starting those conversations. Intelligent Minds was shown at the high school. If you haven't seen that or have an opportunity, request it at your schools. We did purchase it, and the high school purchased it with, I believe, with grant monies, but it's something we own as an SAU, so highly recommend that. Professional Development Committee met again all day today, and we're hoping to have something for you perhaps in March, but our agendas are getting really full, but we're well on target. They don't go through till May, June, but we'll have a professional development plan for you because we're kind of waiting how it's going to connect to the collective bargaining agreement as well as a teacher evaluation. So I think we get the collective bargaining through, then we can replicate some of the language so that all three are connected. But we're well on our way, getting very close to completing that. So busy, but all good stuff, a lot of exciting energy.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Roman? All right. Administrative report, Eric.
Thank you. You all have a written report in your packet. I would like to add a few informational items, all of which, I believe, I'll have to add one, will be in the message going out tomorrow early evening. First, our 100-day food drive, first grade. Every year, first grade, well, at least the last 2 years, but I think it is a first grade tradition in collaboration with GATHER, which is an acronym, but it's the Seacoast Food Pantry. So tomorrow morning, first grade at the community celebration will be kicking off their 100th day food drive. The staff this year is being asked to donate boxes of pancake mix, and tomorrow morning, as part of the assembly, each grade will find out what item it gets to bring in. So it's an exciting event. It was incredibly successful last year. This entire hallway was chock full of non-perishable items in support of families around the seacoast. So that's happening. Another initiative, and it just goes to show how much our students are interested in doing and how much our teachers and faculty are interested in helping them do it. You've probably heard about an animal welfare crisis regionally. So to help New Hampshire Society for the Protection of Animals, there are hundreds of German shepherds being held as evidence in a significant trial in this state. Unanticipated needs for these animals, these German shepherds, the shelters regionally are experiencing the burden, unanticipated burden of providing food, shelter, blankets, you name it, for these animals that are not able to be adopted yet because they are articles of evidence in an ongoing trial. Okay, so if you can imagine, animal shelters are pressed for supplies and resources as it is. These animals have come in. So Ms. Vaz and her community service group, this is their most recent drive. Last month and through December, they gathered gently used winter coats. That was incredibly successful, as I reported. This is their latest thing. It has gone home, and it will be an attachment in the message.
What the dogs do.
Yes, and as I mentioned, the dance tomorrow night for 7th and 8th grade, the semi-formal. Next Thursday, the 5th grade is presenting United We Stand. They've been working very hard. This will be in the message as well, but it's going to be an exciting event, as the 5th grade team is describing it, and the students. It is an extravaganza. You heard it here first, the annual basketball game to benefit this year, New Hampshire PAL, between the police and the fire will occur on March 21st. March 21st is that game. And as I've been working on with our Channel 22 folks for a little while, but it's going to be happening. We'll be filming shortly, and hopefully it will be airing by February break. Principal's Corner. So yes, the Northampton Principal's Corner, filmed and produced by our Channel 22 professionals, will include an informational section, celebrations and upcoming events, a student feature, and our first feature will be the Green Team, followed by a staff feature, which is more of a sit-down interview format.
That's cool.
And so that will be debuting by the end of next month. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Eric? No? Okay. Financial report.
So this month I've included two reports. One is the monthly expenditure report, but I've also included a revenue report. I do want to address the expenditure report first. There's one item I'd like to point out on page 1. You'll see under our salary substitutes accounts in regular education, we're over budget by nearly $18,000. This is due to 4 long-term substitutes this year, 3 for FMLA leaves, and 1 for a vacancy for the tech integrator position. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions in regard to our expenditure report. I will note that we will be seeing corresponding available balance in some of the other salary accounts due to those vacancies, or
Yeah. We're not paying for 2
leave of
tech people yet.
absences.
Right.
It won't be equal because, particularly for the FMLA, there's sick leave that's accrued. But certainly for the vacancy for the tech integrator, there's essentially a 1-to-1. So the second report is our revenue report. And you'll see that it's broken up into a few buckets. The first of which is local revenue. So this would be our local tax assessments, which is the bulk of the revenue that supplies the school budget. We are estimating a receipt of just over $7 million, of which we've received $2.6 million.
Question about that.
Yes.
I'm 5 years in, and I probably should have asked this at some point in the past. Does that money come in 2 chunks when property tax bills are due, or is it spread out?
It's typically on a monthly basis, actually.
Okay.
So,
So even though people pay twice a year for their bills, it's distributed to the district on a,
right, the town accrues
Regular basis.
interest.
oh, okay. Oh, so the town holds it, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
Okay, thanks.
I will point out, you'll see the last account under local revenue. I don't know if you can read that word, but it's meant to be energy, even though it's kind of
Trenergy.
gobbledygook. And we've received $150,700. This is actually, it was misapplied to this account. If you look down further, there's the last account. That's the energy withdrawal. So it's the trust withdrawal that
Yeah.
went towards the natural gas
Offsets it.
conversion. So that will be adjusted to go into that account. We also have state revenue. So this would be really the adequacy education that we receive from the state. However, as you noted, or if you read the Q&A that I provided, this is actually fully funded by local tax assessment. So we don't actually receive funds from the state, but that is our quota from the state.
It's a shell game.
Right. So that's at 1.7, just under $1.8 million. You will see though there's a new account there, kindergarten aid. So that's a new initiative for this year that we do expect to receive $40,000, which is a new law that was put into effect. Because previously kindergarten students were treated as a half a student for adequacy aid. So now it is not they're not a full student, but they're getting closer.
It's a whole
Getting
child.
taller.
It's a whole child.
And you'll also see it labels CAT aid. This used to be called catastrophic aid, which is not really an appropriate term for special education aid. So that has since been changed to special education aid. And we'll make sure that we change that in our system internally. We also receive, or we're expecting to receive approximately $30,000 from Medicaid from the federal government. And if you flip over the page, we also anticipate receipts of for our food service program. We do get rates and free and reduced population. So, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for Matt? Budget Committee. Budget Committee wrapped up its public hearing on the school budget a couple weeks ago. They voted 8-1 to recommend the operating budget. They voted 9-0 on all the warrant articles except one. I believe the undesignated fund balance transfer to the building maintenance fund was 8-1, but everything else was 9-0 otherwise. So those recommendations will go on the ballot in March. We'll talk about deliberative session for that in a few minutes. Facilities, you have John's facilities report in your packet. Town CIP is on hiatus, and Winnicott update, you have the Winnicott principals report in your packet as well. And Henry's not here to add to that, so.
And can I add one
Yes,
more
please.
informational piece for the good of the order?
Yes.
In case you follow the New Hampshire SAU 21 Twitter page, you may have seen or heard that Lincoln Ackerman will be closed tomorrow. It's the only school closed, and it's due to a water.
Leaky roof?
Matt, speak better.
There was the furnace, there was an oil leak that went into the water heater, so the fire department will be burning off that oil tomorrow, so it's not
Okay.
safe for students to be in the building.
Okay.
So in case you hear it, it's just that
Thank
school.
you. Just
Or
to
you see
connect
it
them.
scrolling,
Okay,
or.
thank you.
Is that stinky to begin with? In the school? Could you figure that?
It's contained only to that specific room. You cannot, there's no smell outside of the room. So.
Lucky they
Wait
picked it
till
up.
they light it on fire.
We have a
Film at 11.
personnel, yes. Personnel nomination, we'll vote on that after we come back from non-public. We'll do that in a moment. Next meeting dates, Tuesday, February 5th at 7 PM is the deliberative session for the school. I believe we typically start a half hour before that with the school board meeting. We go over the specific items and the procedure for that, but we will update you on that. So I would expect to start school board at 6:30. The deliberative session will be at 7. That will be here at Northampton School. It's not officially a school meeting, but I would just note for people watching, the town's deliberative session is Saturday, February 2nd at 8:30 a.m. And I believe that is at Town Hall, but I'm not 100% certain. So, John? Oh, I'm getting away. It's here. I'm getting signal from our Crack Channel 22 team. That will be here at Northampton School on Saturday, February 2nd. So folks can join that. And speaking of our Crack Channel 22 team, I want to thank them because I believe that we are streaming live tonight. They've gotten everything in place and done a terrific job in updating all of our broadcast infrastructure here at the school. So thank you to John and to
Thank
our
you.
crew very much.
What
And
time does the town one start? Sorry.
town, 8:30 a.m.
On Groundhog's Day.
on the 2nd. Should be action-packed. And our next regular meeting will be February 21st at 7 o'clock here. And that's it.
We have 2 joint board meetings that we got.
And we do have 2 upcoming joint board meetings
The
on
13th,
February
February 13th.
February 13th at 7 p.m.
And March 4th at 7 p.m.
March 4th at 7 p.m. Thank you very much. Unless anyone else has any other business, we'll go to non-public under B. Under B.
Under B. I move that we adjourn to non-public under RSA 91-A:3 to B.
We have a second.
A second.
Roll call vote, James.
Cindy?
Greg?
Aaron?
Tom?
All right, and we'll go into non-public. Thank you very much, everyone.